name.
Yeah, he really glammed up. He's like, I got to change my persona. He thought about for a little while just going with one name, just Trotsky. That was too much. He was the fifth child of a Ukrainian Jewish family that lived in a small village in what is now central Ukraine, but at the time was some province of Imperial Russia or whatever.
Yeah.
He came from a family of successful and well-off farmers. Both his parents were well-educated, and when little Lev was about 8 years old, he was sent to Odessa to be educated and to live with a nephew of his mother's who was this young liberal intellectual. So then in 1896, he moves to a town or city called Mykolaiv. I believe that's what it's called now, which is another port city, not Odessa, but still on the Black Sea. And it was there that he was introduced to Marxism and the underground of socialist intellectuals in that city.
I'm telling you, dude, port cities are fucking hubs for just smart-ass motherfuckers.
That's where it's all happening, and especially back in the day before they had the internet and mail was really slow, you basically had to live in a city where a bunch of random-ass people from all over the world happened to show up every day on boats if you wanted to learn anything.
That's why we're elitists, okay? It's not. I mean, it is about the coast.
It is. Yeah, it's not all about the coast, but it kind of is just about how we live on the coast. I remember there was some article, this was probably post-2016 election type article, but it was like about how, you know, people who live in states that have more squiggly borders are like more culturally educated than like people who live in very straight borders. And it's basically just saying like people in the coast and the Northwest are like know more stuff than people who live in the center of the country.
Yeah,
which may be true, maybe not. I don't know.
No, it's just more dense. I mean,
is.
when you have to come up with a state, and it's just like, well, there's nobody over there. Let's just do boxes.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, it's all just one big fucking plane. So I don't know. Bust a ruler out. We're gonna do some squares and some rectangles. Oh shit, we found a river. Do a little squiggle on this one, but still mostly a rectangle.
Be careful.
Don't fudge it. So things for little Lev are about to move very quickly, and I think it's important that we immediately back up and provide a little context for where we are in Russian history. I don't know how familiar...
We're going to go back to when he was conceived, because I want to hear that story.
Baby Nut is... no, I don't... how familiar are you with Russian history?
Honestly, like in the last year, much better. Just with my fucking crazy communist roommate. But
he's always railing against the Tsar, and you're like, okay, but Jesus.
Okay. So much better, but I mean, not great still.
For
obviously.
sure.
I'm freaking pint me, dude.
Come on, man. No shit. That's my whole thing. It is very complicated, and I'm just going to give very broad strokes to give people an idea of sort of where we are in Russian history, because it's important to Trotsky's whole trajectory as a philosopher and as a revolutionary. So at this time, when Trotsky is going to school and getting involved in socialism and stuff, Russia still has a czar, which is essentially the Russian version of a king. They're still imperial. Specifically, Tsar Nicholas II, who rose to that status in 1894. However, just because they had a czar doesn't mean everybody liked the fact that they had a czar. There was discontent and murmurs of revolution that had been brewing since, basically the last 50, 60 years in Russia.
That was a really sexy sentence.
Thank you. So various groups had come and gone over the years, representing different philosophies of where they thought Russia should be headed. These would be anarchists, agrarian socialists, Marxists, etc. And different attempts at overthrowing the government, either through intellectual means of just inspiring the people to rise up through educating them, or through violent means like killing the Tsar, had already been attempted multiple times. Nicholas's grandfather, Alexander II, was actually assassinated by a bomb being thrown into his carriage by a member of a revolutionary party called People's Will. That sort of had
they wielded that correctly.
Sure. They sort of had a notorious reputation that left a mark on sort of Russian revolutionaries for decades, where everybody was like, oh, we don't want to turn out like People's Will, because everyone kind of agreed, like, they went a little nuts. Like, they fucking blew up the Tsar with a bomb. Like,
not all of them.
Yes. But as we'll see, eventually, if people don't know, Nicholas II finds himself on the wrong end of a gun at some point too, along with the rest of his family.
Yeah, holding it. Fucking get at me, fucking Second Amendment people.
Okay, so over the years, different members of these revolutionary groups had been exiled or had fled the country so that they could publish their criticisms of the Tsarist regime without having to worry about the Tsar's censors. So there's a bunch of Russian expat revolutionaries living throughout Europe at this time. Which is all just to say that there was no shortage of revolutionary activity for a young, agitated, smart guy like a Leon Trotsky or Lev, whatever the fuck his last name was, Bronstein.
Why did he actually change it?
We'll get there, okay?
I can't wait.
It's a big reveal.
Neither can that motorcycle. We all gotta go.
So, when Trotsky first gets involved with this revolutionary stuff, he is initially what you would call a Narodist, or a Narodnik. Narodism was a particular brand of social movement in Russia in the late 1800s that favored a form of agrarian socialism, basically agriculture-led socialism, by the Russian peasant class. Because their argument was that opposed to other Western European countries like your Frances, your Englands, your Germanys, Russia had a very specific economic structure because they had held on to their peasant class much longer than other countries had. While everybody else was sort of moving on to being a more industrial country, Russia held on to their serf system for much longer. So they still had, and also just the layout of Russia, they had like a few pockets of big cities, but it was mostly just big, wide open farmland.
Yeah.
So they had a ton of people in the country that were just farm people. And they didn't know nothing. They didn't know nothing from no socialist revolution. And the Narodists had this idea where they sort of put the Russian peasant on a pedestal. And they said they are a special kind of person, this Russian peasant, and they should really be leading the revolution of whatever happens to Russia.
Yeah, that just seems like that's gonna be. I get the most people behind me because of we held on to the serf situation.
That certainly helps too. It was it's interesting when you look at sort of that was an early fight in like early communist socialist groups, because Marx, for all of his like pro working class people, pro workers type rhetoric, thought people who lived in the country were too stupid to know what was good for them, and always leaned more conservative than was good for them, and was basically like, it's the industrial urban worker that is going to lead the revolution, and these bumpkins in the country are just going to have to fucking catch up.
Yeah.
So the Narodists are on the flip side of that. We're like, no, people in the city are the ones who are idiots, and it's really like we need to get back to we're all working on farms and we're all collecting our work together, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So Trotsky's a Narodist. He goes to this young Marxist group, young socialist group in this city, and he meets a woman named Alexandra Sokolayevsky, who will very shortly become Trotsky's wife. And she convinces him to become a Marxist. And from that point forward, for the rest of his career, he is a orthodox Marxist.
The power of a kiss.
Right? Just one sweet little smooch on the lips. By 1989. By 1889. I was like, by the year I was born.
By 1989, we were watching Nickelodeon and we were doing cocaine, and your parents loved it too.
Trotsky and Sokolayevsky are building up a workers' union in Mykolaiv, this city they're in, and they're writing pamphlets and leaflets and infiltrating industrial workers' groups in the city. And by the time they have this group of like hundreds of people, they all get arrested, because that is basically the Tsar's biggest fear at this point, is that these workers' groups are going to form together, go on strike, disrupt the economy, etc., etc. There's also a lot of anti-Tsarist rhetoric in workers' group demonstrations, especially Marxist demonstrations.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Just like they're not getting fucking much from that guy.
Yeah. So Trotsky and his soon-to-be wife and 200 other members of the union get arrested. Trotsky spends 2 years in prison before being sentenced to a 4-year exile in Siberia, which is the Russian government's answer to most things: send them to Siberia.
That's a labor camp. That's a labor camp.
Well,
that's not just like you gotta go hang out there, but you can come back in 4 years.
It depended. Certainly, a lot of the gulags in Siberia were labor camps. There were some people who get exiled to Siberia, and it's literally just like, just go fucking live in that village and like don't bother anybody for a while. And because of that second group, it kind of made Siberia this place where revolutionaries would like hang out and talk about how they were going to get back to Russia and like actually start a revolution. The whole idea of exiling people really backfired on whoever's big idea that was.
Well, especially when you exile them all to the same fucking
right,
town.
exactly, yeah. And don't talk about any of that stuff we don't like. So while he's in prison for those 2 years, he meets up with some other revolutionaries and he begins reading more about the contemporary revolutionary work that's happening in these different expat communities. Specifically, he starts reading the work of Vladimir Lenin, who is about one generation older than him, but is quickly becoming this like hotshot revolutionary, really making a big name for himself in Russia, even though he is currently in exile in London, I believe, is where Lenin is at that time.
Oh, God, I want to be exiled there.
Right? Yeah, those guys had it
fuck? One generation before, you could be exiled to London, fucking Tokyo, wherever you want, Hawaii, but you know what?
I'm down in New Zealand, dude. I'm down in Hobbiton. It's sick. Okay, so he and Sokolayevsky are in exile. They get married. They have a couple kids. Trotsky starts reading more publications written by other revolutionaries, and he learns about some of the early divisions that are slowly forming in the socialist movement. We already talked about the Narodists and the Marxist break, but there were further subdivisions within just the Marxists. There was a subgroup that people would start to call the economists, who argued essentially that they need to start fighting for workers' rights and improvement of work conditions, and like that should be their main goal. Like, continue working within the capitalist system, but just improve the situation for workers.
Yeah.
And people like Lenin and other more orthodox Marxists were saying, no, organizing workers' movements is like a step to radicalizing workers so that they can push us towards the socialist revolution. So he's reading about all this stuff. And after a couple years in Siberia, he goes, I gotta get out of here, babe. I gotta go join this frickin' revolution. And
he's like Hamilton.
She, to her credit, is like, you're right. You should get the fuck out of here. Like,
she started it.
They very much had like a friendly, like, comrade marriage of convenience, where they were like, yeah, we got married and we had kids, but like, whatever, you gotta go do a revolution. Like, I'll hang out here in Siberia. A couple years, I'll get out. I'll join the revolution. We'll, like, whatever.
It sounds like a really, really kind of progressive.
It was quite progressive. So progressive that he, a year after leaving Siberia, got married to another woman and has had a couple kids with her.
Yeah, dude, it's called polyamory. Get used to it, dude. It's here, it's now, it's going to be here forever.
So he decides he's going to leave Siberia. His wife decides to stay with the kids, and Lev Bronstein escapes Siberia in the back of a hay wagon and then forges a passport, taking a new last name, which was apparently the name of a prison guard in the jail in Odessa, where he was held for 2 years, and he becomes Lev, a.k.a. Leon Trotsky. Trotsky travels to London under his new name, shows up on the doorstep of Vladimir Lenin. Essentially, he shows up to the publication that Lenin writes for, which is called Iskra, which translates to The Spark. And it is the most popular at that time revolutionary pamphlet newspaper being written in Europe, centered around Russian politics. And he becomes basically the most prolific member of the Iskra board almost immediately.
Dude, the leaflet is gone.
Right?
I miss the leaflet.
I mean, now we just got these tweets. We got these instants.
Not even that. Like, there's still, like, people, like, in Oakland and shit who are, like, hey, like, we're doing, like, a fucking underground, like, leaflet. Mm-hmm. They're like, all right, I mean, I'll take it, sure.
I always wonder, like, so part of the inspiration for doing this series is I've been listening to a ton of this guy Mike Duncan. He did a History of Rome podcast, and then he's just doing a series now called Revolutions, where he did like one series on different famous revolutions throughout history, and he's doing his Russian Revolution series right now. It's going to take him like another year and a half to finish it, but part of like listening to so much of that podcast made me think like, how would you even do a revolution? Like how like it used to be you would literally just go out in the street and like start yelling about shit and get like 13 or 14 people on your side, and then you would go like burn a house down, and then like shit would just start happening. And I feel like that would never happen now.
Well, no, it does. I mean, even if you look back to like the Egyptian Revolution,
Right.
which was like one of the more modern ones where they they cut off the internet, but they were still somehow like setting shit out.
Right.
Like it's just wild, and I think that's one of the main reasons and problems with like. I don't think America needs to go through a full-on fucking like Civil War revolution,
No.
but you know, like we're just a little too comfortable.
We
And
are.
if I had to print a leaflet, I'd be like, I'm over it.
I gotta go to Kinko's? No way.
They're not going to be open. It's 6:00 on a Sunday. They're not going to be open.
Come on, we all know FedEx office is open 24 hours. Yeah, that's definitely part of the. I think America is very complacent, and also what I've learned is that geography plays a huge factor in it, and the fact that we are all so spread out all over these giant square and rectangular states that somebody poorly drew out on a map.
Yeah, looking at you, Squiggle River Man.
So he gets to London, he gets to Iskra. The other board members of Iskra, as I said, are Vladimir Lenin.
Game
A
over.
couple other guys there are Georgy Plekhanov and Julius Martov. I'm butchering all these people's names, by the way, but just imagine I'm doing a really